So this is my team up here. I'm going to introduce them because I did not do that in the slides here. So myself here, I'm Matt Burton. I worked as user experience designer on Court Whisperer.
Dan Liebling from Microsoft Research, lead engineer.
And I'm Bob Watson, I don't know, helping hand, I suppose, wherever I was needed.
So, and Catherine Alternator, which is from the Self-Represented Litigation Network. She works with a nonprofit organization, brought this project to us, and she brought this problem with her, which is, this is Robert. Robert came to Catherine's organization and had to fill out some family law forms. There were about 20 forms that he was expected to fill out. It worked out to somewhere between 80 and 100 pages, I believe. And he was on page 3, and he threw his pencil down on the desk, and he said, wow, I haven't done that much writing since high school. And she looked at the pile of forms that he still had to fill out and said, wow, I have no idea how I'm going to make it through all of these forms with him. So we, as a team, kind of looked at that and said, wow, that's a really solvable problem, and we want to deal with that as best we can. Introducing Court Whisperer. We started by taking this problem and trying to break it into something that technology could solve. So what we really have is a couple of very explicit things that came up through our research. The first is access. Really, there's the access to justice that's happening here, but there's really physical access issues. I actually spoke with a couple of courts that don't accept handwritten forms. So if you fill out a form by hand, you could do all that work to only see that essentially, to be nothing. And so this problem is physical access. The second is time. There's questions in some of these forms that are very repetitive. You may be asked your name 3, 4, maybe 5 times. There are questions that you may not need to fill out, but you look at them and read through them because they're there. They're in the order of the form. And then they have to be. And that's the court goes through a very extensive process to build these forms in that way, and yet you now are wasting your time going through that. Third is understanding. These questions can be put in really complicated language, and sometimes it's really difficult to work your way through those questions. So we used Court Whisperer to kind of solve these 3 problems. These were the things that we felt we could address. And I'm going to kind of work from the bottom and work its way back up, because I think access really is the essential value that this application is providing. The first is understanding. We spent time going through these questions and evaluating how we could reconstruct them in plain English. So in our app, we have a good example of what that might look like for children in a divorce form, and where you have to fill out who the parent was for a certain child at a certain time, or it's not a straightforward question. And so the way that language works out is really lacks plain English. And so we're able to reconstruct that in this format in a much more intuitive and natural way. The second is using the technology to save you time by asking questions in the appropriate order, as well as using a one-to-many kind of relationship to say, fill out your name one time. We can then import that into a form very naturally. And the last aspect of that is access, which is that this is now in your pocket. And we have a lot of people that really have access to their phones, but don't always have access to a computer. A lot of self-representation happens by somebody going to a computer and having to fill out a form from beginning to end. Well, if you don't have a computer, if you don't have access to the library because it's closed, this allows you to have access whenever you need that form in your pocket anytime. So with that, I think, go ahead and show it. So one last part of this, which is distribution. I should probably have said this aspect of it, which is really what we're offering is a new distribution space, which is that right now, if I go to Washington's court system, I can get to a whole body of forms, and really, I have an option of a Word document or a PDF. What we're kind of suggesting here is actually adding in a multiple format here, which is a mobile access right from their same distribution space. So it's a new way for people to get access to their forms, but it's not necessarily trying to rebuild that system from scratch. So it's a really pragmatic solution in that way. So I think we can go from here, which is, this is kind of a rough idea of what the forms look like when they're listed on the device.
The mobile part we see on the phone, and then there's the server part that actually handles the forms, and so we'll have that set up at the table, which is why it's not here, because you really need to see both halves of it to appreciate the service that it provides. And so to highlight the access, as Matthias was telling you, the forms come out on the phone from the government website. And then that provides access for someone to fill them out either in the clinic with legal aid help nearby, or to take it home if they need to answer the questions, or to make several trips if they have to, and not have to worry about losing their form or getting help when they need it. And so that's...
So when we think about filling out forms, like, it sounds like a very boring type of thing, but as Matt talked about, it's really about access and providing access on a mobile device that's owned by someone, at a mobile device that's passed around in a legal clinic, so that we can maximize the time of the attorneys who are there. When you think about, one nice thing about our app is that if you think about forms, like, the whole concept of form is really a legacy of writing things down on paper, right? And our app doesn't actually require cooperation from the jurisdiction, so we don't have to get involved in the form creation process or schematization of that kind of thing. You can have the jurisdiction or representation come in and create the structure of the data in the app, which then maps directly onto the form, because ultimately we're just producing a copy of the Word or the PDF document. And that gives you other affordances as well. So translation, helping people who are non-native English speakers, you can have this natural language translated into their language. You can do it on your own time. We think the app itself doesn't have to be the endpoint, right? We can think about even allowing people to fill out forms by text message. So envision this dialogue where you're just going on with the bot on the other end. All these things really just plug into our form filling backend. So Court Whisperer is an app, and we invite you to come over and try it. But it's also really a concept of moving forward access to court forms.
Yeah, and I think I'll just close and kind of, I really think the form is a good representation of what access looks like to our justice system. You can't talk to a computer. I work in user experience. I can promise you that's not figured out just yet. But what you can do is use technology to gain access to that system. And there's ways to do that. And really, forms are that access to that system. I mean, I can't call a judge on the phone and talk to him. That's not how that process works. A form is my way to do that. And really, in putting this in the right hands and in the right context, you're really giving somebody access to something that otherwise may be prevented from. So I think that's maybe the thing that we're all passionate about, is that really forms are a pragmatic way for you to speak to something that otherwise is inaccessible.